Hey mathematicians, let's talk about using fraction strips to multiply fractions times whole numbers. So we've already talked about how multiplication is just like repeated addition, where we're adding the same number over and over and over again, and fraction strips can really help us see that and to count up to get an answer. And this is because one of the ways you can read this number sentence 3 times 2/3 is by thinking of it as I'm going to add 2/3 3 times. And in order to do that, I've drawn out some fraction strips, and we are just going to start tacking on pieces, kind of like puzzle pieces. We're going to do 2/3 3 separate times to see how much we end up with. I started off by drawing three whole fraction strips because I estimated that my answer is going to be somewhere between 1 and 3. So just to be safe, I gave myself 3 whole ones. And since the denominator I'm working with in this problem is thirds, I just need to go ahead and divide each of these fraction strips into thirds. I don't know how much of each one I'm going to use yet, but I want to have them prepared just in case. All right, there we go. So in 3 separate colors, I'm going to add 2/3 to my picture 3 times. Okay, so here's the first one. 1/3, 2/3. Okay, I did it once. I'm going to do it a second time. And I'm going to do it a third time. All right, so the way I get my answer is by figuring out how much of my picture, or how many fraction strips did I color in. And in this case, I happened to color in 2 whole fraction strips. So I know my answer is 2. Now there's also another way to look at fraction strips that I want to look at very quickly. Go ahead and get rid of these ones. We can also look at this problem by saying I want to do 2/3 of the number 3. And so the way I would do that is by drawing 3 separate fraction strips. Let me go ahead and pause the video while I get those drawn. All right, that looks a little better. So like I was saying, the other way we can look at this problem, instead of saying I want to do 2/3 3 times, I can say I want to take 2/3 of the number 3. So in 3 separate fraction strips, I'm going to color in 2/3. And this is just looking at these 3 holes as 3 separate holes that we're going to take pieces of. So I'm going to do 2/3 right here. And basically the main difference is instead of just adding on here, I'm going to jump down to the next one instead. There's 1/3 and 2/3, 1/3, whoops, and 2/3. Okay, so the way you would get an answer here is virtually the same. I'm just going to count up how many pieces I've colored in. So I've colored in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 thirds. Now that's an improper fraction, so if I went ahead and simplified it, I would see that 6/3 is really 3/3. Oh my pen is having some trouble today. 3/3 and 3/3. Or 2 wholes. So either way I get the same answer. It all just depends on how you like to look at fraction strips. Do you want to draw the fewest number of whole rectangles as possible, or do you like to break things up into smaller chunks, basically? But either way, you will get the same answer using fraction strips.